we are challenging efforts by states and jurisdictions to implement discriminatory, burdensome, and unnecessary restrictions on access to the ballot, including those related to mail-in voting, the use of drop boxes, and voter ID requirements.
You have to be a left-wing Democrat in this country to be so racist that you not only think that a person of color is incapable of getting a photo ID, but even worse, and this really is worse and more racist, you're not going to do anything about it. Now, if you think that an African American in the United States of America is fully capable of getting a driver's license or even just a state-issued photo ID card, you, my friend, might as well put on a hood and burn a cross on the front lawn. And that's not just me saying it. It's the Attorney General of the United States of America, Merrick Garland.
The right to vote is still under attack. And that is why the Justice Department is fighting back. That is why one of the first things I did when I came into office was to double the size of the voting section of the Civil Rights Division. That is why we are challenging efforts by states and jurisdictions to implement discriminatory, burdensome, and unnecessary restrictions on access to the ballot, including those related to mail-in voting, the use of drop boxes, and voter ID requirements. That is why we are working to block the adoption of discriminatory redistricting plans that dilute the vote of Black voters and other voters of color.
How a drop box, by the way, has anything to do with the racial makeup of voting area, I'll never know. But it does shed quite a bit of light on some of the analysis we've seen on alleged ballot stuffing in those drop boxes. But there's Merrick Garland pandering to a Black church. I wonder if Merrick Garland could address every single individual person there on the stage behind him and explain to each and every one of them why they are incapable of getting a photo ID. I'd love to hear him say that. I want him to, that minister, I'm guessing he's a minister of sorts, wearing the tie right behind him there. I want him to turn to him and say, by the way, sir, I just want to be very clear and lay this out for you in no uncertain terms. The idea that you cannot vote unless you have a photo ID is racist, because I know that you, as a Black man in America in 2024, are incapable of getting a photo ID. Now, I've had a photo ID, Merrick Garland would say, since I was 16 years old, but you see, I have an advantage over you. I'm white. In fact, literally the whitest man. He looks like Casper the Friendly Ghost. You're going to a Black church and you're going to be videoed giving a speech, do something with the makeup. You couldn't be any whiter, and that's what they're all thinking there on stage too. I want to know from him specifically why it is racist and a violation of civil rights to demand a photo ID, especially considering the fact that having photo ID requirements literally protects a vote. It literally protects. If you go to vote and you are eligible to vote and you have every right to vote, and you vote for candidate A, and somebody else standing in line right behind you isn't eligible to vote and shouldn't cast a vote, but they're there because there was no mechanism to ensure that they were who they say they are, and they vote for candidate B, well, guess what, man? Your vote for candidate A is eliminated because of someone who shouldn't have voted in the first place. Demanding ID for voting purposes protects the integrity of the vote, which is what civil rights, when it relates to voting rights, is all about. Every vote should count. And those votes don't count if you've got dirty votes. Also, last I checked, it wasn't too long ago when this guy, the Attorney General, helped engineer a completely unprecedented and despicable demand for vaccinations in this country. Of course, we know now that they weren't even vaccines. They had to change the definition of vaccine to push the thing through. But back in the day, I'll be honest, I got the first 2 shots. Had to. Didn't have a choice. Literally did not have a choice. And when I went to get my shot, guess what they asked for? My identification. You know why? Because his Justice Department made sure that those were part of the rules. Did anybody petition and say, wait a second, I'm trying to be protected from COVID-19 and you're demanding that I have a photo ID? Well, I'm incapable of obtaining a photo ID. This is discriminatory against me. No, that didn't happen. You have to be a left-wing Democrat in this country to be so racist that you not only think that a person of color is incapable of getting a photo ID, but even worse, and this really is worse and more racist, you're not going to do anything about it. All you want to do is, I want to make sure that you can vote without a photo ID. And that's the beginning, middle, and end of my concern about you and your incapacity of getting a photo ID. No, you know what? I'll tell you what. You're really going to convince me that people of color are incapable of getting a photo ID in this country? Tell you what, I want to work with you to fix that problem. Because if you don't have a photo ID, you're not a fully functioning member of our society. I actually care about people of color. And if they legitimately are incapable of getting a photo ID, we got to fix that because they got to have a bank account. They should be able to cash a check. They should be able to travel. They should be able to get a shot or a doctor's appointment or anything that a fully functioning member of our society has the ability to do only if they've got a photo ID. But this guy and his party and his president, the Democrats, they're just fine with people being completely removed from our society and incapable of doing anything like, filing taxes or getting a job. They seem perfectly fine with that. That's kind of racist too. Those people of color who can't get an ID, that's fine. Let them live on the margins. Of course, that's only if you believe the fake premise that requiring a photo ID is racist in the first place. I'd love to go visit Merrick Garland over at the Department of Justice and have a meeting with him in downtown D.C., just a handful of miles away from where I'm sitting right now. But to get into that building, I'd have to show the security people my photo ID. These people are the worst. And there's more. Alejandro Mayorkas, also in the Biden administration, he's pretty despicable too. He was asked about the killing of Laken Riley over the weekend. He was on Face the Nation. And I want you to watch how he responds to this question. And we're going to break it down here. But just understand something. The funeral was yesterday. You're the mother and father of this 23-year-old girl who just got brutally murdered by someone who should have never been in this country and was only in this country because of the result of this guy's failed policies. And watch how robotic he is. Even when he tries to be sympathetic and compassionate, he has to read it from a card.
A 22-year-old nursing student, I know you've been following this, Laken Riley in the state of Georgia was murdered allegedly by an undocumented Venezuelan migrant. The suspect had been detained by Border Patrol upon crossing, released with temporary permission to stay in the country. He then went on allegedly to commit crimes twice, once in New York for driving a scooter without a license and once in connection with a shoplifting case in Georgia. Did those states and their law enforcement communicate to the federal government that this had happened? Should this man have been deported?
We're going to get to his answer. And again, I want you to watch how robotic he is, how unfeeling he is, how dismissive he is. He won't even say this young woman's name or the family name. But I also, as you watch that, I want you to remember what the question is, because they do this. They are masterful at this. The question on the table is, was the Department of Homeland Security or ICE notified by local law enforcement in New York or in Atlanta about the fact that they had just arrested an illegal alien on criminal charges? Now, of course, the root of that question is sanctuary city policies. Sanctuary city policies that dominate because of this man's political party, because of the president of the United States championing sanctuary city policies when he ran for president. That's the root of the question. And the question is, were you notified? Now watch how he answers everything but that.
A few thoughts. First, Margaret, first and foremost, an absolute tragedy. And our hearts break for and our prayers are with the family. Number one. Number two, and importantly, as a prosecutor, having prosecuted violent crime and other crimes for 12 years, one individual is responsible for the murder, and that is the murderer. And we work very closely with state and local law enforcement to ensure that individuals who pose a threat to public safety are indeed our highest priority for detention and removal.
But are you saying there that the federal government had been informed about this individual and the alleged crimes he had committed in those states? Because he could have been deported if that was the case. Was there a breakdown in the system?
So, Margaret, there are a number of cities around the country that have varying degrees of cooperation with the immigration authorities. We firmly believe that
New York did not.
We firmly believe that if a city is aware of an individual who poses a threat to public safety, then we would request that they provide us with that information so that we can ensure that that individual is detained if the facts so warrant.
We firmly believe that cities should cooperate, and we request that they do so. That's charming, isn't it? Oh, well, if you firmly believe and you put in the request, then, well, we have no problem here. Funny. When this guy and his boss, the president, when they firmly believe that Texas shouldn't put up razor wire to protect the border, do they gently request that Texas do so? Or do they take them to the Supreme Court to force them to take down the razor wire? It's amazing what they do when they're really motivated. We firmly believe that cities should cooperate with ICE. Really, did you make them? Did you force them to? Did you use your political influence, since they're your party members, the mayor of New York, the governor of New York, who love to grandstand on their sanctuary policies and virtue signal about they're there to embrace people, and we're going to stand by what the Statue of Liberty says, no matter what our immigration policies or border security policies are. Did you ever do anything about it, Alejandro? We firmly believe that cities should cooperate, and we put in the request to cooperate. Here's the answer to the question that he refused. No. New York never notified ICE that they had an illegal alien they had just arrested. If they did that, there'd be a pipeline of people waiting for deportation. Democrats don't want to do that. And they won't unless they're forced to do it by law. And they need to be forced by law. This president won't do it. And by the way, in a weird way, you just heard Alejandro Mayorkas, in a backhanded way, throw these fellow Democrats and cities under the bus for their sanctuary policies, right? Yeah. This happened because they didn't notify us. We request they would. Some cities are better than others. But if they had let us know, we would have deported this guy. No, they wouldn't have. No, they wouldn't have. And even if he claims now that they would have, and the real problem here is that they didn't inform us that they had arrested him, we would have deported him, and then this woman would be alive. No, not so fast, Jack. Because the very first people to have this murderer in custody was not the city of New York and not the city of Atlanta. It was his guys, the ICE officials and Border Patrol down at the border when he crossed illegally in the first place. They had him in custody. And under the last president, he would have been arrested, he would have been processed, and he would have been put back in Mexico. But under this president, under this Secretary of Homeland Security, they reinstituted catch and release. So don't say, if New York and Atlanta had just let us know. No. You knew. You had him. and you released it, and it's your fault. And everybody knows it, no matter how much you try to lie.